Hey friends, we are live with two lovely people from Team Yoast today. I'm joined by Yvette and Agnieszka. We're talking about the power of inclusive language, as you can see on the screen today. And I won't bore you with an introduction because we have so much to go over the next 40 minutes plus Q&A roughly. So if you have any questions for Yvette and Agnieszka, please share them in the comments and then we'll go through them at the end of the presentation, so that we make sure that we get all the questions answered and that we don't miss anything and we don't lose ourselves in conversations during the presentation. Also, if there's anything breaking, any audio issues or video issues, of course, let us know in the comments as well. But from what I can see, we are good on all the platforms. So Yvette, I'll hand it over to you and let's rock and roll.
Cool. So thank you for your warm words, Jen. Really appreciate that. And my dear people in the audience, before we dive into the matter, we would love to get to know you a little bit better. So please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from and what you're doing during office hours and how you're involved in creating content. Are you writing? Are you editing? Are you creating educational content? Are you creating conversion focused content? Or are you wrangling people in workflows? Also, we'd love to know if you've actually activated the Yoast inclusive language analysis and if you've given it a spin. So let us know. Let's have a little chat.
Malaika, I love seeing you here. I'm working with Malaika on her email funnel. She's a lovely person that I'll introduce you to after this presentation. I would love if you'd address the big glaring gender issue. I want to work with women, but get tons of men on my list, so I never know how to address pronouns. So that is a fantastic question that we'll definitely get to at the end of the presentation, Malaika. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes. So this is us. My coworker Agnieszka Szuba works as a linguist for Team Yoast. And when she started out with us, way before I did, she first focused on research. But along the way, she worked hard, also learn to write code. And she was one of the driving forces behind this inclusive language analysis. And, like me, she adores cats. As for me, I'm currently leading the community team at Team Yoast. In the last years before I joined Team Yoast, though, I mainly worked as a content specialist and I had a passion about creating accessible content. I got to work with one of the world leading accessibility experts, and that really helped me a lot. So, when I was introduced to this new inclusive language analysis, I fell in love with it right away because it makes such a difference. Also, well, let's say it didn't take me much convincing to join the team that was in charge of spreading the word about this new tool, so that I also got to help people learn more about the topic. Because, in my opinion, communicating on the web is all about getting people to know, like, and trust you. Someone's first visit to your website is oftentimes compared to a first date, and for a reason. During a first date like that, there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and they might prove that you're not as likable or not as trustworthy as your date hoped for. Being rude to a waiter, for instance, or making a derogatory comment about someone in a restaurant, or during a story you're sharing. That same goes for your website. Some ways of expressing yourself can be a turnoff to a group of marginalized people or to people who are close to marginalized people. They'll leave your site to never come back. And they might even share that bad experience with their peers. It doesn't matter if you're selling physical items in a web shop, trying to get leads of your website for the services you sell, or whether you're merely selling your point of view. People prefer to be in a relationship or prefer to be doing business with people they know, like, and trust after all. And choosing inclusive language will help you build that know, like, and trust. And we love to help you make that a new and wholesome habit. And actually, I just realized, perfectly imperfect as I am, that I didn't say hi to the people that said hi to us. So, Malika, Jen already said hi. Here's the one for me. Thank you for loving Yoast so much. Also, hi to Monique. Monique is also a very, very active person in the community. And those were the people that say hi for today. Thank you.
And everybody who's watching the replay, let us know in the replays, and we'll get back to you, and we'll respond to your hi, of course, in the comments.
We will, absolutely. So, by the end of this presentation, we hope that you will go home with three things: that you'll understand what inclusive language is and how every website owner benefits from using it, that you'll be aware of some of the most common misconceptions around inclusive language, and that you know how to get started on your journey to make this a new and wholesome habit. How does that sound? Cool? Then let me hand over my proverbial microphone to my coworker Agnieszka so that she can explain a bit more about inclusive language from a linguistic perspective.
Thank you. So, what is inclusive language? Inclusive language is about choosing alternatives for expressions that stigmatize, stereotype, erase, or otherwise exclude people who belong to marginalized groups. And that is any group that faces systemic discrimination and as a result holds less power in their society. Some of the most common bases for such discrimination are race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability, age, appearance, and socioeconomic status. The stigma, stereotypes, and erasure towards these groups are encoded in many different areas of our everyday lives, including in language. Inclusive language is about choosing terms that don't reinforce these harmful ideas. Using non-inclusive words or expressions has a real impact on real people. Words can absolutely harm people. They can make you feel dehumanized or invisible or all sorts of other bad things, even if that's not the intention of the speaker. But words also have the power to make us feel respected, seen, and valued, and other positive things. So if we can build a habit of choosing inclusive wording over non-inclusive one, this will have a positive impact that may lead to a more inclusive society. In addition, language has the power to shape our worldview. If you hear something often enough, you're much more likely to internalize it. For example, if we keep hearing the phrase confined to a wheelchair to describe people who use wheelchairs, it can be hard not to internalize the idea that using a wheelchair is some kind of a tragedy, since the word confined has negative connotations of being trapped in a negative situation. Or the idea that wheelchair users can never leave their wheelchairs. Well, in fact, many of them only need a wheelchair in specific situations. On the other hand, if we hear the phrase using a wheelchair or wheelchair users, it's easier for us to see a wheelchair as a neutral or even a positive thing, to see it as a useful tool that allows many people to navigate the world with more ease and independence. And this sort of view can help to combat some of the stigma or fear of disabilities. Okay, so now that we have defined inclusive and non-inclusive language, let's look at some actual examples. I'm going to show you some made-up examples of non-inclusive phrases in event descriptions. and I'll try to explain to you why they are not inclusive and how to make them more inclusive. So let's start with this one. Sign up for this music event featuring local gypsy artists. Can anyone in the audience maybe already see what the non-inclusive term is here and why it's non-inclusive?
So usually there's a little bit of delay on the line, so we'll give you all a moment, and we'd love to hear. Play with us.
Yeah, and even in the replay, this is still a fun exercise, and don't be afraid of making mistakes. I'm not a native English speaker. I have a thought, won't voice it yet, but this is not easy if you're not a native English speaker, but still create English content. And you still have to be aware of those situations. So fun exercise and an important one.
Absolutely. And you know what an odd thing is? The better your English gets as a foreigner, in a way, the trickier it gets. Because if you have a strong accent and you make quite a few grammar mistakes, people are more likely to understand. And then, as your English gets better, sometimes people fall over you because you say something that they consider you know and you don't.
Yeah.
So, yes.
So Monique says she's not a clue of what could be wrong. I'll give it a shot if you don't mind.
Sure.
I think it's gypsy, just because from the German translation, it would be a term that has been highly stigmatized here in Germany to describe this group of people. Yeah, just a guess though.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, this word is actually considered a racial slur by many Romani people, which of course makes it non-inclusive. It was invented by Europeans, not by Romani people. And in fact, it comes from the word Egyptian, because Europeans wrongly assumed that Roma people originated from Egypt. And also because of Europeans' long history of racism against Roma people, the word has become laden with negative connotations and stereotypes. So that's why the preferred options are Romani or Roma, which are neutral terms, and it's how most Romani people want to be called. There is one exception, though. If you're talking about someone who wants to be referred to with this word, then it's obviously okay to use it. Some Romani people have actually reclaimed the term, so they want people to use it to refer to them. And of course, you should respect how people want to be called.
I do have a quick or an amazing question, I think, for you for the follow-up with this. Let me just make a note of that. It's really tricky to find the right balance for when to know when to use a word when people are not offended by it. But let's go on that tangent in the Q&A section and not right now.
Okay, sure. Okay, let's move on to the next example. So in this sentence, it says, both women and men are welcome to attend this childbirth course. So what might make this sentence potentially non-inclusive? And how would you reword it if you have any idea?
So again, let's wait for a moment for some thoughts to come in.
I think that's one for Malaika, if you have the time to engage.
Mm-hmm. She may not be around for the moment.
Yeah.
Jan, want to take another guess?
So I think it is based on the gender. I mean, that's the the elephant in the room, I think, with this statement that women and men are exclusive to transgender. I have no idea how I would rephrase that in a way that is not including 15 million pronouns, though.
Well, I can tell you how. But yeah, you are correct that women and men can be exclusionary towards people of other genders, like non-binary people, specifically. Yeah, so for example, if you are a pregnant non-binary person, you may not feel particularly welcome to join these childbirth classes when you read this description. Even if you understand that the person who wrote this probably doesn't mean that you actually shouldn't join the course, you may still be hesitant to join it because this phrasing doesn't really signal an inclusive and welcoming environment towards people of all genders. So a simple inclusive alternative might be just something like people of all genders or both parents, something like that.
Wouldn't both parents also be excluding to those who just are pregnant without a significant other?
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah. Yeah, maybe something like both the pregnant person and their...
Maybe just people is probably the safest way to phrase this.
Yeah, true. And Monique says all people as well. So
yeah,
could be a good one.
Yeah. And there is one last example I wanted to show. So here it says, if you're a bit OCD about keeping things organized, you might enjoy a career as a professional organizer. So what word or words would you replace here to make this sentence more inclusive?
So let's give this a minute again.
That's a tricky one.
So what makes it tricky, in your opinion? Yeah.
I have a hunch that it is the phrase a bit OCD.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if that's correct, but if it is, from a personal perspective, not trying to be offensive here, wouldn't see how that could be exclusive.
Okay.
But I'm sure Agnieszka has a brilliant explanation for what's actually going on here.
Yeah, I do.
I don't see another answer coming in right now. So, Agnieszka, take it away.
Yeah, so you were right. The term is OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a medical condition. And of course, if you're referring to the medical condition, then it's the correct term to use. But I don't think that's the case in this sentence. And using this term as a sort of metaphor to describe personality traits or habits, like being extremely organized, trivializes the medical condition and the experience of people who have it. And this can contribute to stigma or, just mental health conditions not being taken seriously. And it can also perpetuate stereotypes about what OCD is, because it's not only, or sometimes not even, about being obsessed with tidiness. So the alternatives that we offer here are pedantic, obsessed, and perfectionist. In this context, maybe even a more positive word like passionate would work.
Monique has a great way to phrase this. If you are hardcore into organizing.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, that sounds more catchy as well. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully by now you have a bit of a more clear idea of what inclusive language is, if you didn't know before this webinar. But just to be sure that we're all on the same page, let me address some common misconceptions about inclusive language. So during our research, we discovered there are quite a few myths about inclusive language. So let's just get the most common ones out of the way. Misconception number 1 is something that we already touched upon, but it's worth repeating. And it's that inclusive language doesn't have any real life effects. And yeah, the reality is that language has the power to normalize ideas. So if we use non-inclusive language, we normalize non-inclusive ideas. If we use inclusive language, we normalize inclusive ideas. And language has the power to hurt people. It can basically function as microaggressions. But it also has the power to have the opposite effect, to make people feel valued, seen, and respected. Another misconception is that inclusive language is a new invention. So the topic of inclusive language has been quite popular lately, which might make it seem like it's a new invention. But language has always been connected to social and cultural norms. It reflects them, and it can also play a role in spreading them. When norms change, so does language. And when people try to challenge harmful ideas, they often also challenge the use of language that reflects and normalizes them. So, for example, feminist activists of the 1960s and 70s were challenging the use of words like he and man to refer to humans in general. And this was part of their fight to increase the visibility and status of women. Misconception number 3 is that the advice on inclusive language never changes. So it would be nice if we just had to memorize a finite list of non-inclusive terms and their inclusive alternatives, and then we're done once and for all. We are set to be using inclusive language for the rest of our lives. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as that, because as our understanding of ourselves and the world around us evolves, and as the world itself keeps changing, so does our collective understanding of what language is and isn't inclusive. For example, you may have heard the advice to use terms like people with disabilities instead of disabled people. The argument is that phrases like disabled people reduce people to their disabilities, while phrases like people with disabilities help to separate the person and their disability. This advice gets some things right, such as advising to use the word disability over outdated words like handicap or special needs, but it doesn't get everything right. In fact, it reflects non-disabled people not fully understanding the experiences and the desires of disabled people. Many disabled people have objected to this advice, saying that they actually like to be called disabled, because being disabled is a part of who they are. They don't want you to desperately try to separate them from their disability, because it is a part of their identity. And using an adjective to describe a part of your identity doesn't mean you are reduced to that identity. After all, no one seems to have a problem with phrases like a Black woman or a gay person. We don't think it reduces someone to their Blackness or them being gay. So why would it be the case with the word disabled? The disability activist and writer Emily Ladau said this: "Disability is a state of being, a fact of life. It's not a dirty word. Furthermore, for so many people, disabled is so much more than a descriptor. It is an identity and culture unto itself. It is a source of pride. So I am disabled. I am disabled just as much as I am a brown-haired, brown-eyed, glasses-wearing female. It is part of me. It is part of who I am." So this is an example of our understanding of inclusive language evolving the more that we listen and try to understand people's experiences, and the more that they understand their experiences and identities.
I had a strong point to add here with the labels. I hate being referred to as Indian, even though it's my nationality. That is like, how do you deal with that? Or maybe that's a question for the Q&A section afterwards, but just thought I'd bring this up right now because that really hit me, because I never had the same feeling for being labeled as a German.
No.
Just a big difference here.
So we will go into this more in general in the presentation, and then we will get back to this at the end.
Perfect.
Okay, another misconception is that inclusive language does not offend anyone and it makes everyone happy. Making everyone happy is impossible. Inclusive language is about avoiding language that harms certain groups of people, for example, through stereotyping or erasing them. But the thing is that some people might be unhappy when they see examples of inclusive language. For example, if someone believes that only men can be good firefighters, they may be unhappy to see people write firefighters instead of firemen. Maybe it makes them afraid that this wording will encourage more people of other genders to become firefighters. Or let's say someone strongly believes in equality, but they just don't understand the point of inclusive language. They think it's unnecessary, and so they might feel annoyed when they see it becoming more popular. It might make them feel pressured to use it, even though they personally believe it's a waste of time and effort. So these people are not happy, but of course they are not harmed by the use of inclusive language. And that's what inclusive language is about. It's about avoiding potentially harmful language. And the last misconception I want to address is that you should feel bad for using non-inclusive language. I get it. It's not a nice feeling to realize that the language you've been using might be harmful to other people. But we have all done it. And even the most dedicated people still make mistakes and are learning. As I mentioned, our understanding of what is and isn't inclusive evolves. So naturally, we will be making mistakes along the way. It does not make you a bad person if you have unintentionally used language that is not inclusive, as long as you're trying to learn and improve. So be kind to yourself and be kind to other people who may not know about inclusive language as much as you do. Okay, so now that we have addressed the most common misconceptions, Yvette will tell us why everyone wins if they choose to use inclusive language.
Yes, Agnieszka, let's talk about that. You see, there are at least 3 main benefits to using inclusive language. On the highest level, it helps build a more inclusive world. Related to your website, it helps improve user experience. And then when customer behavior on your website show that more people, what I call stick around and click around, that might very well lead to higher rankings in your search results. Sorry about that. Moreover, it might also help curb a drop of rankings. But more on that later. Let me elaborate a little bit more on the first one. As we already explained, people are likely to internalize whatever they hear often, whether that's something that improves or breaks down the image they have of the world or of themselves. In other words, the words you use have the power to either make life for the people around you easier and more fun, or harder and more frustrating. And the interesting thing is that if you're intentional about the first one, the smiles and the increased confidence around you will likely reflect the light right back onto you. Have you ever noticed that? Try give people around you a compliment. Watch them light up. Take in their smiles. A little friendliness goes such a long way. The same goes for your website. Now, of course, the content of your site should cater to the needs of your target audience. So, while it should have a friendly vibe for everyone, it should not try to help everyone accomplish all things. I mean, that wouldn't be a smart business decision, right? However, clear, friendly, inclusive messaging is more likely to appeal to everyone within your target audience. And that way, again, they're more likely to stick around and click around, but also to take that desired action on your site, like signing up for your newsletter, or making a first purchase or a repeat purchase, writing a review, referring a friend. And did you know that search engines like Google track how people behave when they click on the link in the search results that leads to your website? If many people return to the search result in a matter of seconds, the search engines see that as a sign that your website doesn't help them accomplish their goals. Feeling turned off by the use of marginalizing or stigmatizing language could be one of the reasons for visitors to leave your site quickly. And that might damage your rankings in the search results. Moreover, Team Google has become more and more vocal about how they care about diversity and inclusion. Search advocate John Mueller, for instance, recently tweeted, "If you write anything for SEO, please watch out for inclusive language. It doesn't take much work, and you might not get it right all the time, but taking steps matters a lot." Also, Google recently updated the instructions for their quality raters. Now, by itself, that's not something very special. They do that all the time. But what's new this time is how they specifically instruct quality raters to watch out for content that promotes intolerance for the views, beliefs, or behaviors of groups, and also for content that contains dehumanizing stereotypes. So, not being intentional about inclusive language might actually start harming your rankings. So, now that we've talked about what inclusive language is, how you benefit, what the common misconceptions are, how do you get started? Well, like with any new habit, it takes time and practice. And our inclusive language analysis will help you with both being aware of what terms are or may be perceived as non inclusive. It will suggest alternatives and also refers you to resources to learn more. And we are so excited that we can share that this tool is now also available in the free version. It already was available in the premium one, and since a few weeks, it's also in the free version. So, how about we take the tool for a spin? And then after that, Agnieszka will share a few more general tips. I am going to swap screens for a moment. So, bear with me. I have it ready for you then.
There we go.
There we go.
Let's make this full screen so that we have the biggest font size possible.
Cool. Thank you, Jan. So, for this purpose, we have created a very basic demo site. Now, first of all, it's good to know that this analysis is not activated by default. So, to activate it, go to Yoast, click on Features, and then right here, you can flip the switch. Turn it off, turn it on, and don't forget to hit Save. And I'm telling you because I did that first. Then let's have a look at the draft post. Now, let me tell you, Agnieszka and I had a good deal of fun messing this up. This is one of the descriptions that we worked on for this webinar. And as you may see right here, the inclusive analysis needs work. Also, you may notice that the SEO analysis also needs work, but that's mainly because we didn't add a search phrase here, because we didn't need that for this purpose. So if you want to start working on improving, making the language more inclusive, you can go right here to the top, and then scroll down to inclusive language and click on the drop down. And as you may notice, there are red traffic lights and orange traffic lights. The red traffic lights are terms that are most generally considered non-inclusive. Then the red ones are terms that are oftentimes being perceived as non-inclusive. So that takes a little bit of an approach. If something is marked red, really take a good look at it and try to rephrase it. If it's marked orange, have a look at it and see how it fits in the context, and then if it's still a non-inclusive term. And if you are a little bit like me, you might be scrolling up and down and not finding the word crazy, as it's referred to right here, right away. Our developers experience that probably too, because they found a way around it. If you click on the eye icon, it will be marked right away.
That's
Making
very
it
handy.
really, really easy. So let's see what happens. The description says, avoid using crazy and is potential harmful. Consider using an alternative, like wild or baffling or startling, or they have another few ones. So how about we make this one baffling for the occasion? And it's gone.
You know what's also cool about this, Yvette?
Tell me.
Especially as a non-native English speaker, I struggle with just the diversity of words that I use, because I find myself going back to the same phrases, and sometimes I have a certain word like 5 times in 3 paragraphs.
Mm-hmm.
With this, it's a fantastic way to write in a way that adds variety for the reader, because I would have never written baffling, right?
No.
But
No.
now I can with this. So yeah, Malika also just point that out. It changes the vocabulary quite a bit, and I think it elevates the quality of your writing if you go with this.
Absolutely. And now I can imagine if you're playing around with this, you also, in some occasions, want to know why. Now, because of the way StreamYard is set up, I would have to go out of this screen and then into a new screen again. So I can show you right now. But if you have a look at this Learn More link, this will bring you to the help pages on Yoast.com, and you'll find a lot of background information there. And additionally, and that's something that we're very passionate about at Team Yoast, you will, at every help page, you will find links to external resources, because we really think that in order to form your own opinion, you should consult more resources and see what resonates with you, and some ways of communicating resonate better with you than others. So take some time to dive into the matter, and we make that easy for you.
Is that a process just of sorry for interrupting, but is that process of going through the feedback that the plugin gives you something you would do after you've written the entire post and you consider the content final? Then you go through this and spice up and make sure that it is inclusive, or do you do this in a different stage of the writing process?
I would say that is really how you prefer to work. Some people like to write and edit at the same time. Some people like to go through the text on different levels. You could have a round on readability, you could have a round on inclusivity, you could have a round on transition words. It really depends on how you prefer to work, I'd say. So if we have a look at another one, be careful when using he or she. Let's find a he or she, as it's potentially exclusionary. Consider using an alternative, such as they. So let's give this one a spin. Then we have another one, and it says avoid using OCD unless you're talking about a specific mental condition. Try verbs like pedantic or obsessed or perfectionist. So let's see if we can turn this into obsessed. Then I have spirit animal for you. You might even become their spirit animal, but be careful when using the word spirit animal as it's potentially harmful. Consider using an alternative, such as inspiration, hero, icon, or idol. So we have a new hero. And then a last one. Be careful when using the word tribe. Consider using an alternative, such as group, cohort, or crew. We'll make this crew this time. And would you look at that? All green. So let me go back to our presentation screen.
I was just thinking, this is so useful, not just for blog posts, but for all types of content. I could even see myself writing my email newsletters, or at least the campaign emails for ongoing automations. I could see writing those in a blog post editor as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I am handing over a microphone back to Agnieszka for some general tips to get you started.
Yeah, I'm going to share some general tips that you can use in addition to using the inclusive language feature to help you start using more inclusive language. So the first one is to ask and listen. So listen to the people who are directly affected by specific language. They are the real experts. So, for example, listen to what disabled people say about what language is inclusive to people with disabilities, and respect their advice and wishes, even if it doesn't immediately make sense to you. But also remember that social groups are not monoliths. So, when talking about individuals, always respect how they specifically want to be called, if you have the chance to ask them. The second tip is to try to understand. Try to understand why certain language is non-inclusive and why the alternative is better. Every non-inclusive term is non-inclusive for a reason. If you understand the reasons behind it, it can make it easier to make a permanent change. It may become easier for you to remember to use the inclusive alternative and feel more motivated to make the change. And that's also why the feedback in our inclusive language analysis includes links to our help articles where you can learn more. And we also definitely encourage you to do your own research. The final tip is to practice as much as you can. Treat writing more inclusively like you would do with any new habit that you would like to acquire. Some expressions are deeply ingrained in our thinking, after all. For example, it can feel very natural to address any group of people with "you guys," if that's what you've been hearing and saying your whole life. Or to use words like crazy and stupid, which are so common in the English language, we don't think twice about their impact. So know that it will take time and that you will slip, but set out to do it a bit better every day. And give yourself space and grace for making mistakes. And with that, I want to give back the floor to Yvette, who will tell us where you can find out even more about inclusive language.
Thank you, Agnieszka. So now we've looked at what inclusive language is, how we all benefit, and the misconceptions, how to get started. And we understand that this is a lot. and that you might want to have a look at more resources later. So if you're just listening and you have time later on, Google Yoast.com help, and you'll enter up on our help pages. There's also several blogs that Jan will link to in his recap email and will include in the show notes under the video. And both in the help pages and in the blogs, we are linking to several other resources because, like we say, do your research, form your opinion. Additionally, we have included new lessons in the all-around SEO course and in the SEO copywriting course on our Yoast SEO Academy. These two courses are unfortunately included in premium, so they require a little bit more of an investment. So I would recommend, if you're a user of the free plugin, read the blog post first, the help page. You'll find a lot of information there already. And please give it a try. And since we're still improving this tool, if you have any feedback, send us a message at support@yoast.com. And I'm looking at Jan, who will probably make that appear here too. He is so handy with this tool.
So this is the Yoast.com. I mean, wait a second. Let me just pull up the right landing page right here directly for the free academy.
Okay.
So that we point people to the right page.
Yes.
And not just the main landing page. I mean, the landing page, you can all see that's Yoast.com. That's quite straightforward.
Yeah.
And let's bring this up right here. Yoast.com/academy. It's a free training. And then there's a very, very reasonably priced premium plan. It's ridiculous, like 99 euros a year for everything that you get. It's a steal in my eyes. So highly recommend checking that out. Go through the free training. And if you feel that there's more room for you to improve, I can see worse ways of spending 100 euros a year.
Yes, absolutely. And it's what I always recommend. Start with free, go through the courses, get practicing. And once you start to see results, you will find that the tool, you will earn the money to invest in the tool. It's likely to happen. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. And we have questions. So
we
over to you, Jan.
Let's start with one that Malaika brought up, and that's something that I wrote down as one of the questions I had for you as well. She was told by a business coach to use language for her ideal client and not try to be inclusive to everyone, especially with gender. Now, context, Malaika is a dating coach, and she mostly works with female clients.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts on mindfully excluding people with your language because they would not be a good fit for your business?
Exactly. And it's in a way what I said. Be inclusive to the people within your target audience. Because if you are targeting purely women, then you're doing, if your language includes everyone, you're doing the people outside of your audience a disservice.
Yeah, and of course, if I'm just talking to a room of women, it's okay to use words like she, women, and so on. So yeah, as long as you're really intentional about it, if you really are intentional that you only want to talk to women, then I don't see a problem with that.
And then following up on that, how do you deal with the different pronouns? Because I'm helping her with the email marketing right now, and there are both men and women on the list. What do you think we should do about pronouns and making sure we address or the person in the way they want to be addressed?
I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. Like pronouns when you address people, or
Should we, for example, when we send an email, should we aim to address, because we now have male, female, and transgender on the email list, should we address all three or use people instead of men, women, transgender, non-binary, whatever? Or do we go the route and stake the pole into the ground, be okay with turning off male subscribers or transgender subscribers because Malika could maybe not help them, or that specific email is not relevant to them? Very detailed, very on the point
Yeah.
question.
It's
Apologies for that.
yes. No, it's very on point, and I'm going perfectly imperfect to share what I think, and that is that from a marketing perspective, if your services are 100% targeted to women, then I would say target that group. And even knowing that you have a lot of men and transgender people on your website, would it be an idea to label them after they come onto your list and move them to a separate automation where you explain a little bit more about who you are and what you do first?
I think for new people, yes, segmentation is one of the things we do. For the people that already are on the list, we might not be able to make them self-identify as what gender they see themselves at. But that's a great point, and she clarified right here, targeting women who want to marry men, but also has male and trans readers. But that's a great point. I think just sticking true to what your core market is, and being okay with that.
Yes, and maybe there's other people specializing that you can refer to and maybe refer back and forth. But I'm also wondering, as I know Agnieszka has some very valid and helpful thoughts here too.
Yeah, just one thought that I had, like, I don't know anything about your business and I don't want to question your business strategy, but maybe if a lot of people of other genders resonate with your advice, it can be worth considering. Yeah, is it why am I only targeting women? Maybe you have a perfect reason why, but yeah, that's what came to my mind when I saw the question.
Very fantastic, very helpful advice, I think, and Malika will surely follow up. I do have another question, and that came up in the chat here as well. I think, when is it okay to use? The answer from Malika is amazing. Women are better clients. I love it.
Yeah.
Talk about exclusive language. Yeah.
Well,
It's all
women
good, yeah.
are a better fit for Malika,
True. Yeah.
which makes sense.
Perfect sense. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was just steering the pot a bit. When it comes to using slang like gypsy, we had this example on one of the misconceptions, or identifying what was wrong with those statements, and gypsy was one of them. And you brought up a point that sparked a question. I mean, when is it okay to, or how do I know that it's okay to use a term I know it's exclusive? And how do I know that that specific group of gypsy is okay with being called gypsy? When, for example, let's say we're talking about keyword optimization, and I'm optimizing for a keyword that is non-inclusive. Is it okay to do that? Is it not okay to do that? What are your thoughts on that?
So I would say, if you're not sure if someone wants to be referred with a word that it's generally like a slur or offensive or non-inclusive in some way, then it's better to go with the safer alternative that is generally considered inclusive, and only use the generally non-inclusive one if you explicitly know that a certain person wants to be referred to with this term.
Yeah. And I think this question came up in relation with Malika saying that she didn't really care for being named as Indian. And there's also a tip there that's not really in this presentation, but we have chatted about a lot. And that is about when you are descriptive, when you're using adjectives, only use the ones that are really relevant. Because I imagine in 99% of the conversations or adding Indian is not relevant. And in the specific, very specific occasions where it is, it also may not feel as negative to Malika or anyone else.
Yeah, very useful. And then I had one question, but I think we already covered that. When is it okay to use inclusive terms that might put off others? And I wrote that down while we were talking about misconception number 4. And the example was with the people of all genders versus male and female and parents and so on. But I think the answer for this is if I know my audience would be put off if I use people of all genders because they don't buy into the idea that people can choose the gender themselves for some reason and they want to just say it's male or female, there's nothing in between, then it's okay to use that because it's my audience that I need to resonate with and that I want to speak with. And if I attracted other people who don't agree with what I say, I do them a disservice because it would just be needlessly offensive in that situation. But that's just my thought. I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense, though I'm struggling to imagine a scenario where your audience are specifically people who...
I know quite a few people in my personal network who would say that is complete, whatever you want to call that. I don't buy into that. Maybe, let's say, hardcore religious people, for example, they would argue with the point of a pregnant person being able to identify themselves as a male, because just the pure act of being pregnant for them is tied to being female.
Yeah, of course, not everyone would be happy about using terms like people of all genders. And I would say because I think people can sometimes assume what their audience thinks or what their audience likes. And I would say ask yourself, like, how many people would I be potentially turning off by using this inclusive language versus how many new members of audience might I potentially attract if I use this inclusive language. And yeah, I think that's a question worth asking.
Absolutely, yes. And in addition to that, and I know that there's people honestly struggling with this, and not because they mean harm, but because of how they grew up, etc. And to those people, I would really say, look to yourself, have a look at yourself in the mirror, and tell yourself, with all that I am and with all that I'm having, all that I have, I'm trying to do the right thing. I mean, this is not a perfect world, and we also realize that this tool is a tool that helps, but it's not going to change the entire world. So as long as we all do the best that we can, I think we already make great strides in the world.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic way to wrap up this conversation, as there are no more questions coming in. Yvette, Agnieszka, I appreciate you for sharing so much actionable information with us. I think having this conversation is really, really important. Everybody who joined us live, thank you so much. I'll share a replay link in the emails. Afterwards, I put all the relevant resources in the comments. And I'm looking forward to having you on for the next webinar. I
Thank
hope
you.
there will be one.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for joining us, everyone.